Welcome to Charter Conversations. We are excited to put this series together and share it with you. We wanted to bring together some leaders in the charter school space to create conversations about what they do in order to create a better connection throughout the charter school world. Our guests today are Dan Fishman and Adam Miller with Idea Public Schools. I'm glad you guys are here. So I was thinking about how to start this off and and have a conversation. And one of the things that was popping up on my screen this morning was sort of these unemployment numbers, right? And we all know we're kind of in these difficult times. And I started to also think about some of these college. Well, I thought about all the college graduates, right? This is graduation season. And Dan, take me back to, when you were a senior at Georgetown and you were, thinking about joining Teach for America. What was going on at the time and what made you make that decision?
Sure. Well, first, Drew, thank you for hosting this, and thank you to Building Hope for hosting this, and thank you to anybody who's taking their lunch to join this. We hope we'll make it worth your while. So I never intended to get into education. I think I'm one of the many that was very fortunate to find Teach for America. I fully planned to join the Foreign Service. I was part of the School of Foreign Service. Most of my peers went into something along those lines. And I fully intended to. But I had this amazing recruiter named Steve DeMann who taught down in Roma, Texas on the border. And he was the recruiter for TFA, and he showed up with this full-page spread from the Washington Post with a story about how we'd brought these kids from Roma by bus to Washington, D.C., and they'd walked across the floor of what was then the MCI Center. They sat through a Supreme Court session. They walked across the library at Georgetown. It was just this sort of magical. It was this magical experience where I saw what one person could do for a group of students rather, if they committed themselves to being an excellent teacher and to working as part of a strong school. And I was, at that moment I was sold. So I signed up for Teach for America, and I asked to be placed on a Native American reservation, which is where I'd wanted to live. And fortunately, I ended up in New Mexico on the Zuni Indian Reservation, and that's where this is my first foray into education.
Wow. Did you struggle that? So you went on to get your MBA. Did you struggle not sticking with the education and the teaching course, and the difference between entering maybe the business world as it's perceived and in the education world, and the things that might be perceived as competitive ideals?
By far the most challenging job I've ever had was teaching high school in New Mexico. I mean, by leaps and bounds. I will never have a job, I think, short of maybe working and breaking stone somewhere, that's more challenging than being a high school teacher was, especially in an area like that, which was very under-resourced, and where students had to fight an uphill battle. The transition was not particularly hard for me. No, I think, what folks will recognize when you make the case for them is just how transferable a lot of the skills you learn being a classroom leader or a school leader are, in any other realm, in any other career, because, you really learn tenacity, you learn planning, you learn how to hit goals, you learn how to work with people who want to be there and people who don't. So I actually did not find it to be a particularly jarring transition. And I think I was in much better shape than classmates who'd only worked in, cushy jobs where they'd never really faced adversity, and where their goals, I think, were much more reachable than those of a teacher working in a very, low income school with lots of at-risk students.
Describe your work today.
So I work for IDEA, which, as you mentioned, is a public charter school network. We run 96 schools. We serve approximately 53,000 students at this point. We're really proud of the fact that, as of this year, for 14 years in a row, 100% of our seniors have graduated and been accepted to college. 99.85% of those students have matriculated to college. And while our graduation rate, still has a lot of improvement to go, and it's something we're really focused on, our most recent cohort graduated at around 50%. So far above the national average for low-income students, which tracks somewhere between 9 and 13%, depending on the data. So my job is to take this organization that, really has its systems down, that has its leadership training down, that has this really clear mission and vision and culture, and to help grow it into communities that want it. So I've worked over the last 4 years in places like Tampa, Florida. I saw Jenna and Cynthia were on the call, who've been so helpful there. In Cincinnati, Ohio, in Houston, Texas, in Jacksonville, all over the place, to help grow IDEA into places where there's a need for more high quality school options alongside the existing school system, and where we have the partners to help us do this.
What's it like going into a new market? What are the things what's the toolkit that you're the pioneer, right? You're the Lewis and Clark for the network as it expands into Florida, so to speak. What are the tools you use, and what are the things you look for?
That's kind of you to say, Drew. I think some days I feel a lot more like Don Quixote, but it's really a delicate dance, because we don't want to go into communities that don't want us. It's not our job to go in and tell folks that we know better than they do and that they need us. That's just not who we are. So one of the biggest challenges is finding the balance between seeds of interest and where we feel like we have the conditions we need to be successful. So something we did a year before I arrived, and this was to my benefit, is we got really clear on developing a scorecard with 8 different categories that we use to rank different growth regions. And some of them are non-negotiables, some of them are nice to haves. And we overlay that in various regions where, and we try to determine, do we also have support? Do we have support from the local church leader, from the Boys and Girls Club? Do we have support from the district? Do we have support from some of the local philanthropists? Because, to be honest, we cannot grow at the rate we grow without the generosity of local business leaders. So we need a number of those things to align. And
you guys seem to be awesome. Your advancement team in general at working with local philanthropy, right? Did your time at the Philanthropy Roundtable and how you raise capital? I mean, what do philanthropists in local markets, what are they looking for when they're looking to make a major donation? I mean, you guys have had some huge donations, in the $50 million range, and I don't know what the amount was in Florida, maybe $5 million, maybe more. But what are they looking for when they make those types of commitments to your network?
Well, I'll answer that, and then I think Adam can actually add a lot from his perspective, helping shape, how Florida moved quite a bit of funding to draw in some of the highest performing operators. There's no constant across all cities and all states, all communities. But what I will say is, most funders want to see a track record of success. They want to see a strong leadership team. They also want to see a really bold plan. I think it's actually a heck of a lot easier for us to go in and show them our plan and show them our track record and say, we would like to reach 9 or 10,000 students across 12 schools, as opposed to we'd like to launch one school and reach 500 students.
Right.
I think oftentimes in many communities where they're interested in solutions like this, they have tried a number of things already to improve academic outcomes. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, they haven't been realized. So they're eager for, a solution where the scale of that solution matches the scale of the problem. Yeah. So I think one thing IDEA has done well is we've really built this machine that's able to go in and grow quickly and at a large scale. And we make those promises early on because we're able to keep them. And that's, I think, probably the thing that distinguishes us most and that makes us most attractive to school districts, to communities, to philanthropists who want to see this happen.
Well, that's great. So you're in Florida and you meet Adam, and so I think the Jacksonville paper, you described Adam as the Ulysses S. Grant and Eisenhower of.
I may have been reading a biography of Grant at the time, but
well, it's funny because I have it right here, right? And I love it. I love this guy.
Yes,
he's awesome.
I haven't read this Churnout bio. Let me put a big plug in for it. It's one of the best.
But Building Hope and has been working in Florida quite a long time. And Adam, your reputation is you're a badass. I mean, you really have done a lot. But what I think people may not know is how you you're actually a really mission driven guy. I mean, you've been involved in this charter space for a long time, and the other day you mentioned the story about how you started your first charter school. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I'll echo Dan and thanking you for hosting this and giving us an opportunity to talk about some important issues. So, yeah, I had a slightly different route into education than Dan had or a lot of other folks. I actually struggled in college. I was not the best student. I was much more focused on athletics than education and quit college before I graduated. Moved to Florida and just kind of lived the good life for a while, surfing and bartending. Throughout, then at one point, realizing that I needed to kind of get my act together, started volunteering at a local Easter Seals program that was at the YMCA and got very involved working with young children with developmental disabilities and became very passionate about that work. Joined a couple of different nonprofits over the next couple of years, and then through that work became engaged with this group of families that had children with autism, very significantly impaired kids, kids that required really intensive kind of one-on-one interventions. They were not satisfied with what they were getting from the local school district. In my role at the nonprofit, we tried to help them get some additional resources, kind of scale the program a little bit so they could serve some more kids. We ran into some resistance from the local school district, so we decided to start a charter school. And these families asked if I would lead that effort. And I didn't know anything about charter schools, didn't know anything about running schools. But was really committed to trying to help these families and help these kids. So did my homework. I had a lot of help from another charter school organization that was down south of us, and got the school approved and got the contract approved. And the board then asked if I would come and run the school, which I was excited to do, and ran that school for 5 years until my wife got a job in Tallahassee, and that's what led me up to Tallahassee, and then subsequently with the Department of Education.
When I developed my first charter school, I remember doing like 1 and then 2. And I remember like 1 year I had like 7 and a whole bunch of different states. And it was kind of a mind blowing experience to be able to like manage that capacity, to be able to do that type of volume and work and go through the process hand in hand with schools. Your task now is really to expand into Florida with up to 32 schools over a period of time. And it's almost a much different type of experience and work. And so how do you find the fun in that? And how do you find, and how do you navigate through that, sort of as, General Grant?
Well, there's a ton of fun in it, right? So, think about it. IDEA is very mission driven, right? So our student population is 95% African-American, Hispanic, 90% free or reduced price lunch. Just, the mission has always been to go into kind of historically underserved communities where kids typically don't have access to great schools and provide that access to them.
Okay, great. So, Dan, do you think you do meaningful work?
Yes, absolutely. I think the proof is in the pudding. This is the 14th year all of our kids are going to go off to college. If not for COVID, 2 weeks ago, we would have had our college signing day, and the arena in the Rio Grande Valley would have been full 3 days in a row with parents and community members and siblings and younger students who were there to cheer on their sibling who was heading off to college and who was going to graduate college. And they were part of a culture where they were going to go off to college and to graduate from college. And prior to IDEA, that did not exist. And this is a huge swath of Texas. This is, folks don't necessarily know about the Rio Grande Valley if you're outside of the region, but it's a huge metro area with millions of people. So this is really changing the fate of, one of the largest metros in the country.
What's it like seeing, first generation kids graduating from high school and going to college?
Oh, we all dwell on numbers and statistics, but it's just so amazing to see parents, weeping and going up and hugging their child who's made it through this incredible journey. And, they got on this thing in kindergarten and they may not have known what IDEA was, bearing in mind this was, 12 years ago.
In kindergarten?
What's that?
In kindergarten.
In some instances, yeah.
Wow.
And these parents have just struggled alongside our kids. We ask a lot of them. We have a high bar. And this is a bet they took on us 12 years ago. And it's finally real. And they're finally seeing what this all was for. And it's hard not to get a lump in your throat. And now we're seeing that in Austin and in San Antonio, where we'll have our second cohorts of graduating students now. So it's very rewarding. And to your question you posed to Adam, growth is extremely fun because, we get to meet all these great people who come out of the woodwork and want to support this. If you have something really special and really effective to offer folks and you make enough phone calls, you will find friends who, come out of left field and want to help you get this done. And I think Adam and I have seen that in Jacksonville and Tampa. We've seen that across the state. I've seen that in numerous other states. And it's just really rewarding to build this coalition of people who want to launch great schools for all kids.
Is IDEA, Adam or Dan, is IDEA for every student?
I think that every student should have the opportunity to go to a school like IDEA. There is no one size fits all. I think everybody agrees that different kids may do well in different environments, but I do believe really strongly that every single student has the right to attend a high quality, high expectation school that's going to prepare them for success.
100% high school graduation rate is pretty impressive. And there's sometimes out there, people say, well, you don't need to go to college, right? So, you guys are kind of hanging your hat on the fact that people go to college. And so how do you get people in tough communities to believe that they can graduate from high school and can get into college?
To add on to what Adam said, I think folks I would ask, is a comprehensive public high school for every kid? And I think of my own sister who went to our elementary school until third grade and then had to go to a school for students with special needs and then transitioned back to our high school once she'd made the progress she needed to. Was the school right for every kid? Maybe, maybe not. I would argue probably not, because it wasn't right for her at that time, but she was able to come back when it was right. I think you could ask the same question of IDEA and it's a similar answer. But I would agree with Adam that every kid should have the opportunity to go to a school that holds them to a high expectation and it's going to, to help them achieve whatever their goal is, be it, earn a certification that's going to help you have a high paying job or head off to college. But we get asked this a lot, Drew, in a lot of communities that we go into, and people are initially skeptical. And one thing we tell them is, take Jacksonville or Tampa as an example. We're going to be serving a single digit percentage of all the students in the area. And we know that there's at least that many students that really, really want a rigorous, high quality education. Some of them are already going to be bought in going to college, and some will not. But we consider it our job to make sure that we explain to all parents why we think this is a good option for them. So, we don't want to wait for parents to come to us who are already bought into this, because we're not going to necessarily be serving the kids we know we need to. So we go door to door and we make the case for why this is, probably the best opportunity for your child. Or maybe, you need to know your own child and make that decision. We do, just as a bit of background, we do have a percent of students that head off to technical or career-oriented programs, and we don't consider that to be a failure in any way, shape, or form. We just want to make sure they head off to really good ones that have a track record of graduating students and that have a track record of helping them, have a gainful career. So while we don't prioritize it, we don't preference it, we certainly don't punish kids who want to go down that route, and we stand with them and we help them, figure out the right path to go down.
I think you're starting out in Tampa and Jacksonville. And I think what I'm asking is, how are they embracing IDEA coming in, an out-of-state network that is doing great work? What is the perception then?
We are working on building those relationships within both of those communities. We're a little further ahead in Tampa because we started a year earlier, and we're going to open a year earlier in Tampa. than in Jacksonville. But we've actually seen a lot of interest and a lot of strong positive responses from the community. Sometimes it's a matter of just breaking through some of the kind of myths that exist about charter schools in general or about charter school management organizations, and just getting out there and meeting with people and explaining what it is that we do, what we want to offer, and listening to the community in terms of what is it that you really value in your schools, and how can we be part of that larger system of schools that's going to prepare every kid for success. What's also been really helpful in Hillsborough, for example, is we've had a really great relationship with the school district in Hillsborough County. Staff, superintendent, school board, they've all been really supportive and have embraced this as a partnership, an opportunity to really partner together to make sure that every kid in Hillsborough has got access to a great school.
We're in the time of COVID and the pandemic. How is IDEA, or how are you guys, building community within your schools? And what are you seeing down at the ground level? What are some interesting things that are going on?
IDEA's response to this has been just extraordinary, just the same as we've seen in a lot of school systems around the country. As soon as schools were closed in both Texas and Louisiana, we developed a plan. We set goals around that plan. We deployed our distance learning platform within a week. We developed modules for teacher instruction, or for teachers rather. We have deployed over 15,000 computers to kids. And specifically to your point around community, we've really taken on the responsibility of making sure that we're supporting the communities that we have schools in. And one of the ways we've done that is through meal service. So as of, I think, a week ago, we've served over 1.3 million meals across Texas and Louisiana. Right. So we're doing 180,000 meals a week, every day, Monday through Friday. Family can come and get meals at every one of our campuses, and we don't turn anyone away, even if you're not an IDEA student. If you live in that community and there's hungry kids, we want to feed them. So we've really stepped up, I think, again, as many school districts and educators around the country have during this crisis.
In the interest of transparency, I'd say, we have some pockets of excellence, and we also have some real areas of improvement. So, it's harder. I think IDEA's hallmark is its consistency of program across schools. Yeah. That's a hell of a lot harder to do when our program model is shifted overnight. And it's harder to do when the people who manage our principals can't actually be in schools, checking to see how things are doing, meeting with principals, helping them reorient. Now they can pop into classrooms that are happening virtually and try to assess and provide some of the same support, but it's different and it's more difficult. So I think we're seeing some incredibly creative teachers, as I'm sure anybody who works in schools on this call is seeing as well. And we're also seeing some examples where there's some serious improvement needed. So I think we are reacting quickly to try and train those teachers to create some of the the programming, the lessons, the mechanisms they can use. But we still have a ways to go, and we're looking at some of our high performing peers like Success Academy and figuring out what we can beg, borrow, and steal from them.
I had been hearing from some schools that the enrollment's a little bit delayed or behind. Are you noticing any of that as an effect of COVID? Are people hesitant to sign up?
Yes, we've retained the vast majority of our students. I think the ones who are here are very happy that they're a part of IDEA because the response by IDEA has been so organized and excellent. Yeah. But yes, I mean, we are down next year a fairly significant number of students. Normally we are very aggressive in knocking on doors in the communities we're in and we're going into because, as I mentioned before, we don't leave to chance the students we serve. We want to go into the neighborhoods that are our lowest income, that have the least access to high quality schools, and knock on doors and get kids signed up. So without the ability to do that, our numbers are down. So we're working to try and figure out how we can close that. And we have to lean heavily on word of mouth, which is, a very, very strong area of recruiting for us. But it's tougher when we don't have schools in certain communities to really be able to depend on that.
I wanted to recognize that IDEA is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what makes you both of you optimistic about the future for IDEA and as well as school choice?
One, I think that the best predictor of future performance is past performance, right? So IDEA has this track record of success, celebrating 20 years. We just saw a couple weeks ago that some of the new rankings came out, and we had some of the best high schools in the country according to U.S. News and World Report. The J. Matthews Challenge Index, I think 11 of the top most challenging high schools in the country. 11 of the top 25 were IDEA schools. So I think we've got this track record, and we also have a commitment to continuing to improve. So that's what I'm excited about, and why I see a really bright future for IDEA. And then in Florida specifically, we've got in Florida kind of this confluence of events that's really made Florida a great place for IDEA to come, with the Schools of Hope legislation that was passed back in 2017 that really addressed those regulatory, policy, and funding issues that were really the barriers for why organizations like IDEA and KIPP were not expanding into Florida. So with the Schools of Hope legislation, in Florida now, I really feel like we are just set up for success in the state.
Oh, that's great. What's the future hold, Dan, in your opinion?
I'm very bullish on it because I've met a number of our principals and residents and our current principals and our assistant principals. And I think we just have so many good young leaders in the organization that the future is extremely bright. We have invested very heavily in terms of our time and our resources and our financial ability into training principals and residents who will spend 2 years with an existing school with a high performing principal, learning how to launch their own school, as a very capable principal. And I think we have over 100 in the pipeline right now. So we have just so many really capable people who are learning to lead our schools, who are leading our schools and getting better and looking for the next thing they can do. With a bench this good, I don't think the future can be anything but bright.
Wow. Well, with that, I want to thank both of you for your time in speaking with me. I think this has been really informative. I'm glad we were able to just sort of connect and get to know each other here. Thank everybody out there for your time today. And please feel free to send us any questions. And again, Dan and Adam, thank you very much.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Drew. We appreciate it.
Take care. All right. Stay safe.